All right, we're live.
And you're gonna run the commercial?
I was trying to find it while you were telling me, but I'm gonna go ahead and run it. Hold
All
on.
right, good evening, everybody. All right. That was all exciting.
I'm all excited and everything. Okay.
Okay.
All right,
I'm Sammy Chefrare.
Again, Narnique Nikki Grant. You can call me Nikki for short. Mike, that would help. If that can help you too, you can call me Nikki. So we're rounding out our series we had with all the candidates for District 20.
Unless somebody else call us and they want to talk to us.
Okay, listen. We
invited everyone.
We have a few more weeks to squeeze in like one or two more people, okay?
Yes.
So we've done all the Democrats, all that responded by, because some people didn't respond.
Some people, one person.
Yeah. Oh, well, so you're just going to... Okay.
It's just one. We spoke to everybody else.
All right. So we spoke to everybody else. One person didn't respond. And so now we have the pleasure and privilege to talk to a libertarian. And we are, if you've ever been on our show, we are all about opposing views. Those who agree with us, those who don't agree with us.
It may not be opposing. It may not be opposing.
But I'm making a general statement, ma'am. Okay. So we're gonna speak to Mike Ter Maat. He said to pronounce it as M-O-O-T or M-O-T. So that's what I'm doing. I'm hoping I'm saying it correctly. And he's the libertarian who is running for District 20. And so we are excited.
Sandra, well, thank you. I'm the one who's excited. You guys bring so much energy, but you have to put up with me. I get to talk to you. I'm the one who should be on top of the world right now. You guys talk about what happens. Maybe we'll disagree, and maybe we will. But as we were just chatting a moment ago, if you care about the people of District 20 and I care about the people of District 20, that's what's most important. After that, we can have a food fight. I don't care, but we agree on the big picture. So that's fine.
So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about who you are, and then go into explaining a little bit about the Libertarian Party, and then give us a little bit, before we go into questions, a little bit about your vision for District 20.
Sure. Well, I appreciate that. I am running as a libertarian, a member of the Libertarian Party. I'm the only libertarian in the race. So we are not going to have to face a primary, right? There is no other silly person who wants to run as a libertarian. I've got that whole lane to myself, and I'm very excited about that. I am a police officer. It's a second career for me. I've been on patrol for the past 11 years. I work for the city of Hallandale, which is, most of your listeners probably know, is at the southern end of Broward County. It's an extremely diverse community, which makes it exciting and interesting and educational all at the same time. It is a second career for me. I worked as an economist for many years. Before becoming a police officer. I worked for the federal government for a couple different agencies, a couple multilateral agencies, had my own business educating bankers, worked for the White House a couple of years, taught at Nova and at Barry and George Washington University in Washington, D.C. So, kind of a little bit of a diverse background, but a lot of things that led to the decision to jump into this race. Some of the issues that I think are most important to the folks of District 20 happen to be issues about which I have cared deeply, both personally and professionally, for a long, long, long time. One of them being police reform. As a police officer myself, I'm very aware there's a lot of things that we can do differently, that we can do better. We can talk about that in detail as you and your audience feels like.
Yeah, we will talk about that because we want to know what that looks like to you.
Okay, great. And economic development and poverty. I think there's a lot of things that we ought to be doing differently there and doing better as well. I would argue that the war on poverty that that we launched in the 1960s. When I say we, I was a kid, and you two, probably your parents were kids in the 1960s. And, we were very optimistic, right? We were optimistic about the war on poverty, the 60s and the 70s. And I would suggest that most economists have given up on a lot of the ways that we approach poverty, the old-fashioned ways that we used to approach it. And I think it's a time for a fresh new approach. I've got some ideas. I truly believe that our problem is what I would call this persistent intergenerational poverty. We just have far too many folks, especially in urban areas, who are finding it difficult to get out of poverty, right? In the rest of our economy, we see all kinds of mobility. Rich people become middle class become rich. It goes all mixed up from time to time. But at the bottom rung of the ladder, it's very difficult to escape poverty for a number of reasons. I think we have a lot of bad public policy in place, things I'd like to change. So to the extent to which you and your audience are interested in talking about that, we can do that too. You asked about libertarianism generally. It is what it sort of sounds like. We take very seriously people's liberty. We think that the most important thing that a government can do is protect your liberty, to protect your rights as an individual. And that means things ranging from keeping you safe as a police officer. I think it's sort of my job to protect your rights, right? But also, importantly, especially lately, importantly, we believe as libertarians, it's important to be protected in many cases from the government itself. We think that the government is a little bit too nosy. I'm understating that. I think it's overplaying its hand in a number of ways, and in a number of ways that will take a long time to change, in a number of ways that I think we can start addressing our problems relatively soon. And that's in areas that we already said we want to talk about regarding poverty and criminal justice, police reform, but also in other ways. I think that people ought to have greater choice in their lives and be able to live out their lives in ways they see fit, in line with their own aspirations and expectations, and less in line with what the government says. And that ranges from more choice about where they send their kids to school, more choice about where they live and how they live. So it's a matter not so much feeling completely differently from any other political persuasion, but a matter of priority. Number one for us is maintaining your personal individual rights.
All right.
Okay.
Wow.
So I have a first question. Do you want to go first, Marnique? But I have a question.
Go ahead, co-host. Go ahead.
So I know that you're a libertarian now. Have you ever belonged to any one of the two major parties in the United States?
I did. I belonged to the Republican Party for a while. In those days, you'll have to take my word for it.
In those days. Okay.
In those days, the Republican Party, was struggling with how conservative it wanted to be, things like this, right?
Okay, so tell me, I'm gonna interrupt you a little bit. I'm sorry. So when you say in those days, what years are you speaking of? Because I'm older than I probably look, which all right.
Late 80s, early 90s.
Okay, I'm familiar. So that was Reagan and the Father Bush years.
And right, G.W. Bush.
They believed in trickle-down economics. Did you think that worked? Did that work?
Say that again?
They were into trickle-down economics.
Some were. And, in those days, as President Reagan said, a rising tide would lift all boats, remember? And we were all very optimistic that would work. And for many people, it did. I would argue that probably for most Americans, it did. But as it turns out, it's really not the case for everybody. Again, if you're at the shallow end of the pool, you are anchored to the ground by bad public policy and a number of other things that we can get into. And you're watching the rest of America sail over the horizon. This is where the gap comes from that keeps widening between, say, middle class and low and moderate income Americans. That gap keeps widening and widening. We need for the wage rate at the lower end of the scale to come up over time. And I believe the number one problem that we have had that holds us back is the way our education system works, and a number of mobility issues as well. So, yeah, did we hope that trickle-down economics would work? Of course, we hope. Everybody hoped, right? But for a number of Americans, it doesn't completely work. It takes getting the government out of the way in a couple of instances, particularly education and criminal justice.
Right, but you said you're an economist, so you would know, right? Did it ever seem like it would work?
Well, yeah, like I say, for a lot of Americans, it did. You know, when with tax cuts, for example, greater investment, we had better free trade policies than we had earlier. We had several years where the economy really did do quite well, and consequently, most Americans did quite well. So, for a lot of Americans, it worked out great, but for a number of Americans, it did not.
I'm sorry, but that administration ended with a big deficit. So.
Oh, you mean the national debt, the government debt?
Yeah. So how did that work? How was that well? And they were in a hole, like borrowing money and from other nations and those types of things.
And unfortunately, with the exception of a few of the Clinton years, every administration since has piled debt on top. Republicans and Democrats alike. They've gone back and forth. Who can raise the debt by more? Pick your champion or pick your chump. But we have not done a good job as a national government in general, no matter who's in power, of controlling that. Now, as you may well know, the national debt is greater than a year's income for the entire country. And that is a chunk of change. It's bigger than it's been since World War II. That is all cost that we are leaving to be inherited to our next generations. My grandchildren, your great-great-great-grandchildren.
Okay. All right, co-host, what you gonna ask?
Okay, so police. Can we go to police reform, or do you want to work our way down?
We might come back to the money stuff, but yeah, we can stay here.
We go back and forth.
Yeah.
Okay. So police reform. You are in law enforcement. Can we ask what are you a police officer, a captain? Where are you in terms of law?
I'm a police officer. I'm a patrol officer. I've been on the road for over 11 years.
Okay, so over 11 years. So
let me ask a question before you actually really ask your police reform. So how do you transition from being an economist to a police officer? How does that happen?
It's not completely easy. I've always wanted to be a police officer. I first took an entrance exam when I was a grad student in Washington, D.C., and just decided I couldn't choke it off financially, to be honest. Police officers, well, in D.C., they continued to be ridiculously underpaid. And in those days, they were double ridiculously underpaid.
And it was dangerous to be in D.C. in those days.
Well, that's true. And I was interested in, being able to raise a family, and I was young, and I'm not proud to say this, right? But the financial aspect was very daunting. So I applaud those men and women who did make that commitment, notwithstanding the money issues that they had to work their way through. So I stayed in school. I worked as an economist for many years after that. I didn't go to the police academy until 2010. I turned 49 in the police academy.
Okay. So
I don't know if that's much of an answer. The answer is it's hard. I mean, it was a bit of a transition. There are some things about being older that make it, I don't want to say easier, but that make more sense.
You could afford to be a police officer now because maybe
truly, yeah. I mean,
you didn't have a wife and you got time and all that type of stuff.
Well, I was able to get the kids through college.
Okay.
Right. And that was a tough one. I had to borrow money to do it, and they had to borrow some money to do it, but we managed to work our way through that. So yeah, that kind of thing matters.
Okay. Yeah.
So as you know, we do have a legislation that is currently waiting to be passed for the reform. But I don't know if you've watched our show before, but for me, the police reform would mean I'm not looking for reform. I'm looking for straight up dismantle and start from scratch. And the reason I feel that way is because we all know where the police was created, what the foundation is for the police. And so with this climate and with how things are going with Black Lives Matter and police brutality against Black people, tell us a little bit about what your police reform looks like. And does it take into account where we are today?
Yes. And you're right. I'm probably going to disagree with you on a few things. No, I don't think that police are fundamentally an institution that has to be tossed out. And yes, I do know how police are hired and trained. I think there's a lot of things that we need to do differently from soup to nuts. And as an overview, I believe that our community leaders need to be not just more involved in each step. We'll talk about each step, but much more involved. And I want to come back to that because while I do think that there are problems that you can lay on the doorstep of police officers ourselves and on the doorstep of police unions, I would be remiss if I accidentally didn't mention that I think there's a lot of things that our political leaders, our community leaders, our city leaders could be doing differently that they're absolutely not doing, and in too many instances don't even have an interest. So we'll come back to that. In terms of managing police, overall, we need to make it much more like other industries. In other words, underperforming police, you need to be able to get rid of them more easily. You need to be able to get rid of them for a much more far-ranging set of reasons. You need to be able to.
Can we take a pause on that? Let me ask you a follow-up question on that. So that's because of their union, right? They have a very strong union, and that's why they're able to get. I don't want to call it a pass, but it might be a pass, and that is difficult to fire them because they have a very strong union. So
let me clarify. That's not exactly right, but let me clarify.
Yeah, okay, because then the question would be like, what is your position on unions, right? Because that's. But go ahead.
Well, let him clarify. Let him clarify.
Okay, clarify.
Not exactly right. I'd like to hear this.
Okay, it's not the union; it's the union contract, and there's a big difference. The contract makes it very difficult to fire a police officer. That contract is negotiated, yes, on the one hand with the union. Wait.
Okay.
And in the other hand with the employer. In my case, the city. In some cases, the state. In some cases, the county. Right. Let me tell you a story.
Okay.
Absolutely true story. There's no reason for me to exaggerate. The last time my city negotiated a contract with us, I sat in on some of the negotiations, not because I'm a union rep, because I'm an economist, right? Mike's the nerdly money guy. Let's make sure he listens in. You get the idea. We wanted a raise. I don't remember what the number was. Let's say it was like 5%, right? And the city didn't want to give us a 5% raise. They wanted to give us, I don't remember what the original number was, say 2%. Okay, we want 5, they want 2. Spends 2 years negotiating. We end up getting like 3 or something. Okay, whatever. Not a very interesting story. I'm listening, waiting for the city representative to say, we want greater transparency and discipline. We want the community leaders to be sitting on a board overseeing training. We want for the mayor, the city manager, the commission to be appraised and apprised of what's going on in terms of discipline, how it's meted out. We want to be able to see records. You get the idea. Any number of reforms that get discussed all over the United States, right? You with me so far?
Yep.
Not a peep. Not a peep. Now, yes, we could be frustrated with the union. And, you know, in some ways, maybe we should be a little bit frustrated with the union. But asking the unions And they're not all the same, but they do have a number of characteristics in common, right? Their job is to get as much money for their members as like any other union, whether it's in the public sector, like cops and firefighters and teachers, or whether they're in the private sector union, they represent factory workers or any other group. Their job is to make the working conditions as nice as possible, to protect them from getting fired in situations where they don't want their members to get fired, to get as much money as possible. That's their job. So we could be frustrated with the unions for not coming up with a better contract that's more reflective of reform initiatives. But it's the politicians' jobs to ask for that, to demand it. Let me explain how I think that conversation should have gone, right? If it were me, and obviously it wasn't, but okay, if it were me, and I were, let's say, the mayor, right? The grand poobah of our town. And by the way, she's a terrific person. I don't mean anything terribly pejorative, but if it were me, I would have gone to that meeting myself instead of having an attorney who represents the city manager, who represents the commission, who represents the mayor. I would have gone to that meeting myself. And this is what I would have said. You know what? Your 5% raise, you can have your 5% raise. We're not negotiating on money. Here's what I want. I want the right to fire the next officer who does something stupid that I don't like. I want the right to pay the good ones more and the bad ones less. I want the right to hire officers from other agencies because they're the type of officers I want and not start them at the bottom. I want to pay them what I want to pay them. I want the right to bring in officers from other states who are certified by other agencies. I want the right to make this work like any other business, and I'm in charge. I want the right to have complete transparency for the entire commission and for the public to see what goes on as far as the results of administrative action, for disciplinary action. Let's negotiate. Now,
Okay.
The union would have said, this is what the union would have said, right?
Okay, I need to stop you on that. Okay, well, just because I understand, that's one of those things where we're talking theoretically and stuff like that, right? But the reality is that a lot of the politicians wants to get the endorsements of the police union, right? Because they're trying to get reelected. So that's one thing, right?
Yes,
so then
you are right.
We've seen examples of where police departments, when people make certain demands on them, they're like, we're not coming to work. Right. So that becomes a safety issue for the residents of that city. So I know, like, you would love to see them have this conversation, but at the same time, they're gonna be like, well, what if they decide that they're gonna all call out sick? And we've seen that happen in some major cities, like in the past couple of months, right? So I mean, yeah, you want them to say that, but then at the same time, also think about the position they're in. The endorsement is one thing, that might be selfish, but we've seen in Buffalo, the whole police department, decided to resign. The special unit resigned because they were mad that they arrested an officer that knocked down the old man. The police officers in Chicago decided they're not coming to work because they didn't like something that happened. So when cities are taking this into consideration, that they're like, yo, these are the people that protect us and secure us. How much demands can we truly make on them and really get it without putting the people in danger? So factor that into what it is that you're saying.
Well, first of all, everything you said is true. So don't, if I accidentally say something that sounds like you're wrong, I didn't mean it. Okay. You are right about that. However, the reasons how do I say this? Those examples where police officers, they're not allowed to go on strike, but if there's a slowdown or a work shortage, something like this, I don't know of a situation where that happened because of a union negotiation.
They just do votes of no confidence to whoever it is that's trying to get them to do something.
That does happen, but usually it's because of a decision they didn't like, not because of a negotiation. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I still believe that the scenario that I paint where the politicians are more demanding in negotiations is valid.
Okay.
Now, this is what I think the union would have said. Forget about it. You can have your raise. We're not doing it. This is the conversation that goes on the next day in roll call. Okay. the rep comes and says, yeah, the mayor said we could have our 5% raise, but she wanted, all this disclosure, and they wanted to be involved in training, and they wanted transparency. I told her to go pound sand. Half the guys in that room are saying, you said what? I could use the coin. I could use the extra 3%. In other words, there is a silent majority, and I'm not sure we're silent, but I would argue that a majority of police officers are taking the ride for police reform if it's done the right way.
What's the right way? Listen, what's the right way is something that's real interesting. No, the right way. Now, when we talk about right way, that's that old generic talk that what's right to you ain't right to me, ain't right to her, ain't right to him, right?
Well, that's a good point.
Let me say one thing. For example, like last summer, we saw what happened with George Floyd. With we saw the truck, and so a lot of police departments had to be like, oh damn, like we need to go audit all of our files because they had officers who probably had 16, complaints against them that they completely ignored, and then now they're like, yo, if one more thing happened, we all in trouble, right? So some police department saw people resigning. They were leaving. They was like, yeah, you know what I'm saying? I ain't.
That's a good thing, isn't it?
It could be good, bad. It could be good. It could be bad. It could be whatever. But
it sounds like a good thing to me.
It may be a good thing, but what it also says is that there's a lot that was being tolerated, ignored, covered up, whatever, allowed to happen without anything being done, right? And some of the others, they're like, okay, I'm in a drop right now. Like if I suspect you understand what that is.
Yeah, we got to drop.
I'm just try to ride out the next 2 years and hope to God I don't do anything that's gonna really ruin my life. So it may be good, but like but they left just because they're like, well, I can't hit nobody in the head no more without me worried about losing my job. That's why, that's why most of them left.
Okay, now we got problems, but I don't want to exaggerate them. I don't know of any officers. This doesn't mean that they don't exist. I personally don't know any officers that are going to resign if you tell them you can't beat people up. Come on. Now,
no, you didn't say they can't beat them up. They just can't put themselves in a situation where there might be a complaint. I grew up in the 305, Miami-Dade County all day. There are officers that have reputations of doing things that are just like, not okay.
You're right. And we know, look, our agency, I'm not just saying this because I got to work with these guys. If you're right about your viewership, you probably don't include a lot of guys I work with, right, in your viewership. So I can say anything I want.
The
people that I work with.
Watches, so yeah, there's some people in Hollandale there.
All right, good.
Okay.
The people I work with are great officers. That's the truth. We do know of agencies.
Most officers are great. Like I would say 99% of them are great.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't say that much, but okay.
No, I would say that much because we don't have like.
All right, you two can argue about whether it's 90 or 99 later. But look, we do know that there are agencies that, how do I say this, have more to clean up than we do. Okay? I'm not arguing that I could make this happen by Friday at 2. But I am saying that if politicians push harder, the fact that the majority of police officers are open-eared about reform would eventually find a meeting of the minds. This is going to be a tremendous amount of hard work in a number of ways. And I should take a moment to defend the police officers' view of why good officers are scared too. But be that as it may, this is going to be a tremendous amount of hard work. But I don't think there is a substitute plan. I don't think the Republican plan. I didn't come on your show to trash Republicans. I don't mean it like that.
Sure.
Too many Republican politicians stand in the way of reform. And I believe that is because they don't want to get out ahead of the police unions. And the police unions don't want to get too far out ahead of their membership. And some of their members are scared. One of the big reasons members get scared is because, well, first of all, it's change, right? And change is always scary. Most of us are guys. Guys don't do as well with change as gals. Let's just be honest. A lot of us are of a certain age, right? That makes change even harder. And the police profession is one that's difficult to transition out of. If you're a police officer, that's probably all you know how to do. So it's not so easy to say, well, this ain't working out. I think I'll jump ship and go do something else. None of these are excuses. I'm just explaining why it's difficult to get officers to come along quickly with the idea that there's going to be some change afoot. One of the big things that officers fear, not irrationally, is the fall of qualified immunity. And it will fall, right? It's already going down state by state. Whether it takes a fall federally or not remains to be seen, and probably doesn't matter if we take care of it. We eliminate it on a state by state basis. As a libertarian, it's very important to me that people who are wronged by a police agency, by a police officer, have the opportunity to gain redress in court. As an officer, you don't want to be working in an environment where, notwithstanding well-intentioned efforts, you're going to lose your house because you screwed up at work today. And that's what officers are afraid of. Most officers are not afraid of, if I wake up one day and I'm really a jerk and I intentionally hurt somebody just because I felt like it, I might get in trouble. That's not the mindset of a police officer. The mindset of a police officer is, a lot of people out there are, gunning for my skin, makes me nervous. I'm glad I have qualified immunity. People are talking about taking it away. That makes me scared.
But the thing about it is, when a police officer make a mistake at work, I mean, that's kind of like a serious mistake, right?
It's
like
a big deal.
My sister worked at McDonald's, and they get fired if the register is short, okay? And that's like,
that's exactly right.
Even if it's short or if it's too much money in there, you get fired because apparently you didn't give somebody enough change or you gave somebody too much. You lose your job. So like, if you're a cop and you mess up at work and somebody's dead, and you're supposed to be like, just oops, don't take my house. There's no consequence. I shouldn't go to jail.
It's a big deal, but you're absolutely right. We work in a high liability industry. It's not for everybody. And that's why there's so much training, and that's why there's so much insurance involved. But the vast majority, I'm not going to argue with you that police officers have never been criminally minded. That would be stupid. But the vast majority of things that go wrong are truly mistakes.
So when a doctor makes a mistake, they sue his insurance company, not the hospital.
Exactly. And
so why does the city or the county or whatever have to pay for this police officer's mistake? Let him get some insurance and he gets sued.
Yes, and that's the way it should work. Officers should be required. What's that?
That's not how it works, though.
No, it's not.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Is it okay if we agree?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely okay if we agree.
Yes, that is the way it should work. Mm-hmm. Police officers should be required to carry liability insurance like a surgeon. I mean, a doctor is the excellent example. The vast majority of things that go wrong in surgery are not because the doctor decided, right? I mean, it's because he screwed up. Now, if you're a bad surgeon, I'm not enough, I'm not a biologist, so I'm not going to pick examples. But if you're just not good at your job, you're not going to be able to afford the insurance. Same thing with a cop. Now, if you're just not good at this and you make more than one mistake, you're not going to be able to get insurance. Now, the reason this is the way we want it to work is both sides of the equation. On the side of the person who is injured, the victim, the person who has been wronged, the person to whom something bad has happened, we want them to have redress, right? They can go to court, they can sue. If they're right, the officer was wrong, whether the officer made a mistake or the city trained him wrong or whatever the problem is, the insurance company ponies up. Look, in these situations, you're not going to make things okay, right? But they got to pay. They pay. The officer is going to face a very difficult situation getting insurance, and we want that to work that way because the insurance company is not going to be held back by all these silly negotiations. you put your finger right on it a moment ago. The politicians sometimes don't have the guts to ask for what we want them to ask for because they're afraid of the police union. They're either afraid of losing the endorsement, or they're afraid of pissing off their constituents who love the cops, or they're afraid of the blue flu, right? They're afraid of the police union. Not so with an insurance company. An insurance company is not going to say, oh, we better not jack that guy's rates because we're afraid of what the union's going to do. That ain't going to happen. So having a private sector insurance company be the deep pocket and, in effect, the one that holds officers accountable when the city can't do it, refuses to do it itself, is a good thing. In other words, I agree. We need to make it more like other industries. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. But so I was confused about how is it that why they're afraid to lose their house if what all the requirement would be for them to get their own insurance policies.
Well, that's right. But the conversation you and I just had, most officers haven't gone through that.
Okay.
Insurance is not now made available to us. Right now, we're told, don't worry, the city's going to make sure that qualified immunity keeps you safe. That's all we're told. So when you tell a bunch of officers that's going to go away, they're like, maybe this isn't the job for me anymore.
So let me follow up here. Are you in support of the George Floyd bill?
There are things about it that are a good idea. And I don't like to, just say for the entirety of any particular bill, right? But to the extent to which it lines up with what I believe in, which is police reform, absolutely. And there are aspects that we have to pursue quite vigorously. I'm not a giant fan of doing things at the state level that ought to be done at the city level. And I really don't like doing things at the federal level, almost without exception. States are really the place where these reforms have to take place. Retraining, decisions about, at a detailed level, about what holds we want police officers to be able to use and things like this, they really have to be made at a departmental level, and the community needs to be involved. One of the things that breaks my heart is to see when things go wrong, the politicians, frankly, and I think they're being honest, they don't know how the officers were trained. They don't know whether what happened was acceptable or not. I mean, it looks horrible, right? So they immediately jump in front of a camera and say, that stinks. We can't have that. That ain't going down. This was wrong. And then they find out over the next 36 hours, well, yeah, Bob, the department for which you're responsible, that's how they're training these people. They are. Yeah, like maybe you should have looked into it 3 years ago, not 3 minutes ago. This is the kind of thing that really bothers police officers when the training goes one way and the city's perception goes another way. I'm not trying to let people off the hook. I'm just explaining that it's a frustrating process all the way around.
Okay, would you agree with me that the reason why that we have a bill at the federal level is because many states have not made that that determination or made that decision that their police departments need reform.
Yes.
The reason I believe that the federal level is doing that is there's just way too many instances of Black and brown bodies being murdered.
And white.
Pardon?
And white.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's for real though.
Okay.
Yeah, that's real.
Yeah, no.
The majority. I'm not arguing with you. I'm just pointing out it may be a bigger problem than you think. The majority of people that police kill that are not justified, right, which is what we're talking about.
Yes.
I mean, that's the term of art. It's not a good term, but wrongful deaths, right? The majority are white. That doesn't make any Black, brown life any less valuable. I'm just pointing out that in my view, this is a significant problem that is not at its core merely or substantially or necessarily a racial problem. In other words, if we come at this as a racial problem per se, we're not getting all of the bite of the apple that we need to get. I think it's a bigger problem than that.
I guess we're gonna have to disagree on that. And I think that if it wasn't for the amount of pressure from the Black and brown communities, the police brutalities and or wrongful death and or unjustified killings would not be on on this stage had it not been for our community.
I believe that you're probably right about that.
Yeah. So and
I believe you're probably right about that.
So you like parts of the George Floyd bill, but not all of it.
No, what I'm saying is I might like all of it. I just don't like going on the record in favor of a particular bill because that bill changes every hour and then I'm stuck looking stupid. Look, I think that at a detailed level, these things have to be handled at a much more local level, number one. I think that the bill does not cover a whole bunch of things I wish were covered. Transparency issues, qualified immunity. These are very, very important issues that I think have to go state by state. And by the way, back to the issue about how police can be brought along. And I do believe that in the long run, police are natural allies. Nobody wants to work in an industry where everybody hates your guts. Let's just be candid about that. And in a generation, 20 years from now, whoever you might think is a bad apple today isn't going to be working in the industry. That's not to say that we're going to be 100% perfect, but things are getting better. In terms of bringing police along, I believe that cannot be done at a federal level. That has to be done at a state level, and in some cases has to be at the county level. You can't tell an entire industry from the top down, this is the way it's going to be, love it or shove it. It just doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. And so what I'm getting from what you're saying is that, I'm one of those people that always believe that election matters. So that's going to really depend on who's voted in, right? So you could say like, oh, it could be the county to do it or the city's responsible. But if you got like clown elected officials, I'm sorry, I don't mean to call them clowns, but if they have the elected officials, like you said, that wasn't even willing to ask give us this in return for your 5%, then we don't need that elected official being responsible for, negotiating what it is that police officers should do if they're scared to ask to make sure that the resident of that county is safe, right? So right. So if that's the approach that needs the
approach I suggest is frustratingly long, is your point.
Right. So if what you're suggesting, and if we're gonna buy into that, then it makes it even more important who it is that you vote on a local level, because you can have people that are in office and it's not gonna change. And then when I do agree on some level about states should make certain decisions, and the Constitution allows for that, right? Congress is responsible for some things, and then there are things that the states are allowed to control.
That's
right?
exactly right.
But right now we're witnessing states like just do some things that just doesn't make sense to a lot of folks, right? What they're doing with police reform, and definitely what they're doing with voting rights. What's happening with voting rights is like I just don't understand. So in that instance, I think the federal government needs to get involved, because it's, like you have these kids, like just say you have a kid and you're like, okay, I'm going to allow you to like express yourself and do what you want to do. And when they show you that they can't manage all of that responsibility, what do? You take it away from them. And I mean, like,
you don't take it away.
Want to do that. Maybe you might not want to do that. Okay, I'm sorry. Maybe you don't want to do that, but in some instances that has to happen. And I particularly think, like, at least in two issues of what we're seeing right now, it needs to happen. Definitely with voting rights and what's happening with women's rights and abortion rights right now. Because, I don't know, like, how people, whatever folks feel about, pro-life, pro-choice and all of that type of stuff, what Texas is doing to me is like
madness,
mind-boggling. And that should not be left up to Texas.
It sure isn't.
And then if you are going to leave it up to Texas, then I guess you shouldn't have a Governor Abbott. you know? So that may be the way to resolve that. I don't know.
Well, that was a mouthful and for me an earful. Look, I certainly agree with your sentiments. However, in my view, the federal government is the child and the states are the parents.
Really?
Yes.
So he's an anti-federalist. Okay.
The federal. Don't make the rest of my hair fall out. Look, the federal government is supposed to have very limited authorities. And look, do I share your frustration about the way certain governors behave? I live in Florida, so don't get me started. Right now we have an argument between, imagine if you were a libertarian for a moment and how frustrated you would be with how these things play out. For example, can we change topics for a moment and talk about COVID just for a second?
Sure. Yep, absolutely.
I don't mind wearing a mask. If I had little kids, I'd probably send them to school with a mask. I'm vaccinated. I'm 60 years old. I work as a cop. I come into contact with people all day long. You're darn right I am vaccinated. I'm twice vaccinated. I'm going to get my booster. I'm going to get my flu shot, my shingles shot. I'm going to get my booster 5 times a week if I have to, right? I'm a big vax guy. But I'm not a big fan of the government telling anybody that that's the way they ought to do it. Now, we can argue about that, but let me leave that aside for a moment, right? We have the school board deciding we're not going to let the parents decide. We're going to take, in effect, that authority away from them, and we're going to mandate that the kids have to wear masks. All right, we can argue about that. Then we got a governor who says, you school boards are authoritarian. I'm even more authoritarian. I'm going to take your right away to decide, to take the rights away of parents to decide.
And make you work for free.
And make you work for free. Wow. As a libertarian, now my brain is blown up twice. But wait, one more. The President of the United States has decided I'm going to get governors out of the way who don't agree with me. So now we've got an authoritarian telling an authoritarian to back off. We can argue about masks and vaccines, but the point I'm trying to make is I believe that every level of government has gotten a little bit carried away with trying to glom on to as much power personally as possible. I think that politicians naturally try to gain as much power as they can. Maybe they're well-meaning and maybe they're not, and we can argue about that too, although I'm not going to argue with you because I truly don't know in most cases whether they're, just well-intentioned or not well-intentioned.
So tell me why you would run for a federal seat and not one of the local seats. Because I hear all of what you're saying, and if the local has like the most, where most of the things are supposed to should happen locally, why would you run? Why would you run for a federal seat instead of a local seat?
Thank you.
Most impact would be here.
To stop
what you're saying.
To stop people from taking power away from the localities. Someone has to stand up in the federal Congress and say, we don't have the authority to do this. We don't have the right to drive up our national debt until it exceeds an annual income for the entirety of America. We don't have the right to take away states' rights to make decisions for themselves, even when we think those decisions are stupid. We don't have the right to sit back and watch a president take so much authority. One of the big problems, I don't mean to change topics.
Not just this president, the last president too?
Yeah, I would say at least the last 4, but I would say this is a problem arguably since I was a kid. Presidents have been taking too much power. Not to change topics completely, but one of the big lessons about Afghanistan and our foreign policy is presidents assuming they have all kinds of authority without congressional approval. And you just end up down a rabbit hole because you end up executing on ethics that don't reflect the ethics of the American people.
So do you agree with the withdrawal or you don't?
I like that we withdrew. Naturally, we're all pissy about how it was executed, right? And that's a completely different issue. But no, we should not have been there for as long as we were. We can even argue about, the nature of our invasion in the first place. And I realize that we have to defend the United States. And I realized that we were attacked from abroad. We were attacked by people who originated their authority in Afghanistan. So yeah, you have to go after that and stop it. But does that imply that you need to occupy a nation for 20 years? Does that imply that you have to put up with 6,000, not 3,000 American deaths? Does that mean that you should be putting up with 200,000 deaths of the Afghan people? Does that really reflect the ethics of the American people? I would suggest that it does not. I would suggest that it reflects nothing more than the power interests of the presidents that have been elected.
All right. Well, I have to say, I'm enjoying the conversation. I like the fact that we are able to talk and be on different sides of things. But I think it's important for our viewers to see that, to see the conversation, to hear your side. So we're going to go into, other candidates have been throwing out some things, and I wanted to see what your thought was about it. More so with District 20. So let's go back to that. So you have impoverished cities in your district. And I've asked that same question to a lot of the candidates. What's your plan? Because I know that the three cities that I'm talking about is Belgrade, Pahokee, and what's the other one, Sandra? Is it Belgrade, Pahokee, and something else? I can't remember.
Oh,
the other
in that area? South Bay.
South Bay, yes. Mm-hmm. And those, the percentages, one of the other candidates came to the percentages of poverty is like 40-something%, which is extremely high.
It's huge. It's also significant, however, in the other places.
Okay. What are your plans for that specific area? What plans do you have to kind of revitalize and help them out of that situation?
Yeah, and it's a number of things, and it's not necessarily specific to one spot. At the federal level, policy is of course sweeping, right? But there are certain public policies that are in place today that make it very difficult for anyone to get out of poverty. The number one problem we have is bad public schools. Let's be candid. Public schools in Florida are not as good as public schools in other states. Public schools in Florida are not as good as private schools in Florida. And public schools in Florida do not work as well as other businesses anywhere in the United States, in other industries. The reason for this is well understood. Every economist in the United States knows what the problem is. Public schools don't have competition. Public schools have monopolies over the use of public funds. Consequently,
you're going to have to break that down for me. I'm sorry, because I'm trying to understand that. It's important for me to understand because I'm trying to understand. So you said that public schools do not have competition. Public schools, and
that's why they're not good in Florida.
And that's why they're not good. Okay, so you're going to explain to me why, right? Okay, I'm going to let you finish. Okay.
Public schools everywhere, right, have monopolies over the use of public funds. Public funds are not available. We have charter schools, and charter schools are doing a great job in a lot of places. Charter schools outperform non-charter schools in many places, and it turns out that that's the case whether charter schools teachers are in unions or not in unions. It's not the union per se that turns out to be the problem with public schools. Teachers' unions are a political problem, sort of like, Senator, you were pointing out that police unions can be a political problem. Mm-hmm. Teachers' unions can be a political problem in terms of
because they want that BTU endorsement too.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it happens, right? It happens. And I love teachers. I got teachers in my family, and I worked as a substitute teacher for a couple of years myself. I have every respect for teachers. But I do think that teachers do not realize that their own compensation would be greater if there were more competition for their services. The only competition for teacher services now are in, across jurisdictions. If you're going to go to work for someone else, you're going to have to geographically move, or you're going to have to go to work for a private school that does not have access to public funds and spends all of its energy trying to save money, right? Private schools usually don't pay very well, their teachers. Some of them pay abysmally. And that's a problem for all kinds of reasons. But the money that's raised at the local level for purposes of education should attach to the student. And the student should be able to decide, the student's family should be able to decide where the student goes to school. Whether that's a school that is being provided by the state, by the county, by the school district, or being provided by anybody else in the private sector. Now, in some places, when I worked in Washington, I used to live for a while in Arlington County. When my kids were little, they went to Arlington Public Schools. Arlington Public Schools are the opposite end of the scale. There are those who would argue they're the best public schools in the United States. Some would say they're the best public schools in the world. One of the things that those schools had going for them was a tremendous amount of money. But the other thing that they had going for them is that they were constantly under pressure to keep up with all kinds of new ways of doing things. There were a lot of private schools there because it was a relatively wealthy community. There were a lot of private schools there that could compete because the families had a lot of money, and the private schools could compete without having any access to public money. Not so in District 20. District 20 does not have very many private schools, and they're not very big, and they have a hard time competing because the people in District 20 don't have a lot of money. Now, a lot of the people that I've talked to in District 20 say, well, if the private schools had access to public funds, it wouldn't do us any good because we don't have any private schools here. Trust me when I say, if you made public finance available to the child's family to go wherever they wanted, the Archdiocese of Miami would take notice by Tuesday. You would have good private schools. I'm not picking on the Catholic schools. They do a good job and a good bang for the buck, but all kinds of people would take notice. There would be private schools, and it wouldn't take a generation. It would take 1 year. For private schools.
Don't charter schools get public money?
Yes, and that's a great example of competition that does a good job of improving the public school systems. But there's not enough of them.
Okay. I mean, I have one child in charter, one in public, so
And I'm sure you like both the schools, but I bet the charter school is a pretty interesting environment, isn't it?
Yeah, but how? Okay, so I have a child that I actually paid for her to go to private school, and it was like the worst decision. So I put her.
Well, that happens. I had good experience and bad experience in private schools.
So I did that, and I was like, I spent all this money to do what? And I put her back in public school and made her repeat the grade, which she's still mad at me about. But I
understand. Well, you did the right thing. If you're pissing off your kids, you're doing something right. Trust me.
So. Yeah, so I mean, I am.
I sent one to a public, one to a private school, and they switched from time to time. My kids had challenging experiences in Broward County, but I learned more than I probably wish I had.
So you're saying the poverty has something to do with we have bad public schools, right? So
we have bad public school because the people are poor, right? So, and if you can't get them out of poverty, you can't get them to schools any better, Right. So it's like, what do you do?
So what you're saying is the poverty in those cities, and I'm pretty sure you said generally, is about the bad public schools. So
that's one. I'm saying that's one factor, one important factor.
Okay, so and so continue on with your other factors and tell me what your plan will be.
Sure. Another big factor is our criminal justice system. You know, let's be honest, the system of which I am a part. I am employed to be a part, right? In addition to the police reforms that we talked about, which are important, there are other important elements of criminal justice reform that I think are important. One could possibly argue more important. I think that we criminalize far too many things. We need to look, the decriminalization of marijuana is on the doorstep nationwide, right? That's almost no longer an interesting topic. We need to get that done and get it behind us. But I also believe that the way that we handle other drugs is not working. And I believe that that's the case, whether you look at it from the left or from the right. We have a horrible problem in the way that the criminal justice system sweeps up so many people. Our sentencing is ridiculous. If you compare the United States sentencing guidelines to other democracies, it's
ridiculous.
In most cases, it's not even comparable.
Mm-hmm.
So we send a lot of people to jail. We send them to jail for a long time. And it's bad for our families. It's bad for our communities. It's bad for, you know, that what we always talk about, the cultural fabric in which we live. It just doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. But and so it just undermines all kinds of economic development, and it's a big contributing factor to poverty. If you look at what happens to families in these situations, it's quite obvious from the data that these things are highly related. The other way to look at it, of course, is from the standpoint of what do we do to take care of people who are involved in drugs? We have a huge opiate addiction problem in the United States, all over. We have problems in District 20. We have problems everywhere in the United States. We have problems at every socioeconomic strata, but I would argue it's a more acute problem at the bottom rung of the ladder, particularly in terms of the health consequences. We have in other words, we have opiate addiction among wealthy people, but they have better access to health care and various other ways to get themselves treated. But for people that are of low and moderate income who have a problem, we need for them to call 911, and that's pretty much the last thing they want to do, right? They're afraid a police officer is going to show up and arrest them for mere possession. Now, we have laws in Florida that preclude that, but most people don't realize that. The other thing is that people, you know, the law says if you have a health problem, you can call, you're not going to get arrested. But we need people to call before they just go into cardiac arrest, right? I've done a lot more CPR on opiate addicts in the last couple of years than I've arrested people for drug-related problems. The health consequences are enormous, and we want people to reach out for help earlier than when it's too late. And that 911 call is very difficult when everything is criminalized. And I don't think, go ahead.
Okay, no, because I think the state of Oregon, I think Oregon just passed some legislation about how they deal with people who are addicts and the different types of drugs. So yeah, they're going to be a model for states if they're looking to maybe take that step. There'll be someone that's already doing it, and we'll see.
I think we're all optimistic about that, right?
Yeah.
And back to our earlier discussion, I just mean this rhetorically. What do you think the chances are of a federal legislature being that creative? Probably about zero, right?
Yeah.
But even if they were terrific and creative and could come up with the right solution, I still think these things have to be handled at the state level.
Right. And then I think New Jersey did something, but they did it with like mushrooms or something and a certain amount of it.
That's right.
There are other states that are looking to do certain things.
That's right. That's right. There's a big argument that hallucinogens are, because they're not as addictive, do not pose the same kind of health threat. And look, as a libertarian, I'm a big believer in even the stupid things I do are not the government's business. So whether you come at this from sort of that ethical point of view, or from the does it work point of view, I think you end up in the same place. I think it's very difficult to argue that the war on drugs the past 30 years has worked out really well. I think it's really hard to argue that the crime bill in 96, and I don't mean to sound completely disparaging of the people who thought it would work. Mm-hmm. I know our current president of the United States, played a role. I have to admit that at the time, I think most of us thought, well, let's hope. And historically speaking, there were many in all kinds of communities, faith leaders in Black communities, people who were leaders in communities where poverty was a problem, people who cared deeply about crime, police officers. This, I don't mean like every single human in America was on board, but there was a lot of optimism that this was going to work. And it didn't. And we need to face up to that and fix it.
So I'm still waiting to hear what your plan. What's your plan?
We're going to decriminalize a lot of things. Okay. We're going to change our sentencing guidelines.
Okay.
We're going to make it so that we treat addiction differently. Mm-hmm. It's a health problem. I think police officers ourselves are still going to be involved, but we got to be part of the pipeline to get people from where they are to where they need to be in terms of treatment. Okay. I'm not a big fan of mandating treatment again. I don't think you can shove certain things down the throats of people. But even without a legal mandate, I'm here to tell you that a police officer can be fairly persuasive when someone's in trouble. So I'm not suggesting the criminal justice system is going to be completely out of the picture. I'm just saying it has to be used differently. Mm-hmm. And yes, I do realize the criminal justice system, police officers in particular, are sort of a blunt instrument. We're not the most sophisticated cows in the barn, but we can play a more helpful role than I think we are now. So those things have to change. Okay. And then we have to talk about wages. We have a problem with wages. Our wage rates at the bottom end in terms of growth have lagged behind the growth of wage rates at the top end of the scale. And that's for a variety of reasons. Wage rates at the top end of the scale have benefited from the change in America from a manufacturing economy to however you want to characterize it, information society. We also have a big difference in the quality of education in higher education versus high school and primary education. The collegiate environment in the United States is the envy of the world, literally the envy of the world. And it's no coincidence that in colleges and universities in the United States, the government plays a fairly light role. The government, I would argue, plays too much of a role in many situations. But for the most part, the university systems and individual colleges in the United States do a pretty good job of pursuing education in a highly competitive environment. So not so for high schools and
so what below. Would you support? So does that mean that you don't support like free education for everyone?
No, I don't, because education cannot be made to be free. What you mean is someone else pays for it. Am I on the right track there?
I mean, the federal government pays for it, but the person who's trying to get educated don't have to worry about how it get paid. They just show up to class.
Right. No, I don't think that you want the federal government, by the way, the federal government, how do I say this? There's no such thing as the federal government in terms of paying for things. What you mean is other people, right? I just want to clarify.
It could be taxpayers. It could be Jeff Bezos. It could be, Bill Gates. I don't care who pay. I just want to walk in the classroom and study what I want to study and walk out with a degree.
Well, look, as someone who had to,
I have an Amazon box in front of my house right now. They take enough of my money, so if they send my kid to college, hey, I'm with it.
Hey, I hear you. I'm not arguing with your intentions, right? And as someone who put a couple of people through school myself, and have the debts to show for it, I know it's a lot to bite off,
Yeah.
but education is expensive. I just don't believe in making someone else pay for it. In other words, I'm not happy that that anyone has to foot the bill. I wish education didn't cost so much. But number one, if you make someone else pay for it, you've got all of the ethical and political issues that come with that. But number two, you're creating a huge incentive for people to go to college that maybe not all of what you want that to be. Look, in a lot of cases, college is something that people feel like they need to do because their high schools stink. If we had a more creative public high school experience, if we were able to specialize high schools,
I'll put trade in schools, maybe put in some
pardon
trades
me?
in schools, maybe put trades in schools like, plumbing, electricity, has HVAC and all these different types of things.
100%. Not only should the private sector be involved, not only should the public sector be involved, the private sector should be involved in that. But you would have in other nations, you have industries more involved in the education of what we call high school age students than you have in the United States. You have industries more involved in mixed education, apprenticeship types of programs. We need more of that in the United States. We have to stop with this notion of everyone has to go to college. As you may have noticed, the data are changing rapidly about the mix of students in college. It's quickly becoming a very female environment. I don't know that that's a bad thing or good thing per se, but it's unlikely to be unimportant. I think something is changing that we need to be aware of and be very careful about how we accidentally funnel people in directions that maybe they shouldn't be funneled. When you change the price of things, you very quickly change people's behavior. And in 4 times out of 5, that's not a good idea.
Okay.
So as we try to round down and wrap up, we want you to know that Mr. Mike Ter Maat will be on the ballot in January, because this is a close primary state. Is that correct? Right.
Correct.
And, yes. So you will be on the ballot in January with hopefully 1 Republican and 1 Democrat.
And I'm sure they'll be wonderful.
We'll see. And so if you can summarize.
And that's January 11th, 2022.
Yep, January 11th, 2022. So
speaking of your favorite governor, I hate to interrupt, but I know you'll enjoy thinking about this because it speaks to your favorite governor and dumb things that libertarians do. So it's sort of a twofer. When I first jumped in the race, April, right? We immediately went and got this, what we thought was a killer URL, a killer website, right? Mike Ter Maat 2021.com. And the governor decided to put the election off until January. And we thought, what are we going to do with Mike Ter Maat 2021? That sounds stupid now. So we had already sent out emails and everything. So now I have to support 2 email systems and 2 URLs. It's really, I thought you'd enjoy that story.
Yeah. Everyone thought he would have made, did the primaries in August and the election in November at the
of course,
most, right? Like if you stretched it, you stretch your brain, that's as far as everyone thought it would go. But nope, he managed to make it be November.
Of course.
He wouldn't have it any other way. That's so.
But I did want to ask one last question, because there's something that there's there's one of the candidates, one of the Democratic candidates that has a prosperity plan. There are a few of them that are talking about universal basic income.
The UBI.
And, yes. Yeah. And so I want to know. I'm kind of.
It's a horrible idea.
Okay, because I was like, I kind of know what you think, but I'm gonna ask you anyway.
It's horrible.
All right, so tell us why it's a horrible idea.
There's no such thing as free money, right? You already know that.
So if he's not into free education, he's definitely not about to let them get
No, I'm not buying that either. Look,
Mike is like, hell no.
Because he's like, it's gonna come out of somebody else's pocket to get in yours.
It's got to come out. Well, probably not mine because
no, just Jeff.
I wish I had the kind of income that would put me in the kind of tax bracket that would really get pounded by that. But I would probably be in the middle. It wouldn't affect me that much. No, look, I got two problems with it. Yeah, one is that ethical, political.
Got two problems with it.
Two.
All right, well, I'd be interested in hearing your two. But yeah, the political, ethical problem is a big one. I just am not a fan of taking money from one person, giving it to another, just because the government decided. What if the government were to just to play this out?
People voted for it. Like you said, you don't want the government to decide, but what if they put it as a ballot initiative and people voted to get $1,000 a month? Is that okay?
Well, no, because consider this. What if they decided... What if they decided $10,000 a month?
But if the people decide,
what if they decided $100,000 a month?
I almost need that a month. You just give me that a year.
I mean, let's go for it. Why are we holding back?
So basically, what you're saying,
a little too much,
Basically, what you're saying, Mike, is they start with one, it just continues to build and build, and we don't.
I guess that's that slippery slope.
As an ethical matter, I don't think we have the right to just take a vote and decide to take $1 from someone and give it to someone else. I mean, it's not our money. I don't care about rich people. I mean, I'm not a fan of Jeff Bezos, but I don't think that gives me the right to just get people together, take a vote, and take his money.
I need $12,000 a year from you, Jeff Bezos.
Well, maybe you should write him a letter and just ask him. Just be more direct about it.
I mean,
you seem like a nice person. You've got a couple of kids. You got to pay for college. Send him a letter.
So I'm gonna send him a letter because I need me some flow. But let me ask you something, Mike. So
he only said one. What's the second problem?
The second problem is that it doesn't work.
Oh, it doesn't work.
Okay. In other words, how do I say this? The war on poverty, right, that we've been waging for, oh my goodness, 50 some years. Is basically, and don't get me wrong, it's done a lot of good things. But the basic idea behind the war on poverty is that you can help people by improving their situation until they're able to figure certain things out on their own. Either you give them money, you give them a housing subsidy, you subsidize their education, you subsidize something else. And to the extent to which that might have worked, and I do believe that there are situations in which it did work, it doesn't work anymore. Anyone who we were going to be able to help by doing that has already been helped, and the situations that we have now are too persistent and too difficult. You can't give someone money and a crappy school at the same time and think they're going to be okay. You can't give them money and a crappy criminal justice system at the same time and think that they're going to be okay. You can't give them money and then give them a crappy wage rate, an absence of jobs, and no investment in their community because you taxed it all away and blew it on the national debt and passed it on to everyone's grandchildren, and think that the situation is going to work out, because it's not. So never mind the ethics. As a practical matter, it just doesn't work.
So what should minimum wage be right now? You're an economist. Like, what's a realistic? What should minimum wage be? I mean, people are asking for $15. I've heard things that it should really be 24. But I don't know.
Why not 100?
No, I'm not talking about that it should just be 100. I'm talking about an arbitrary number. But like, really, what should minimum wage be? I'm sure there's like some form.
What is the minimum wage?
What's the livable wage? What would a livable wage do? That company should pay people that they don't have to be so poor. They're willing to work for the money.
But you've got to work with me, because I am giving you the answer.
Okay, because telling someone to work for $8 an hour, I mean,
you've got to work with me because I am giving you the answer.
What's the answer? Because you're trying to say ask for 100. I'm not.
Why?
100. but it should be something more than $8.53.
I'm waiting for you. I don't want to interrupt you.
What
is the reason why it should not be $100 an hour?
I mean,
there is no reason. There is no reason. I don't see anything wrong with $100
So let's go for it. Why don't we make it $100 an hour?
We should.
Okay. So that's. I don't think that's a real answer. There, I suspect that there's because
Narnique is on board. Why aren't you on board?
Don't listen to Narnique.
Now you two can argue about this after we hang up, but
yeah, we'll talk about that later. But no, there is a realistic number of what minimum wage should be. I think, right? I don't.
You
think?
Yeah,
I think because like I already said, I'm not an economist.
Why is it not 100? Why is it not 200?
I'm a lawyer. I'm not an economist.
Is there any number that you would say that's too high?
Yeah, I would say $100 is too. $100 an hour to work at McDonald's, I would say is too much. I would.
50. How about 50? How about 50?
Based on the skill set, I would still say that's too much. And because there's the skill set, the risk, what it
30.
is.
How about 30?
I would say it's probably worth $20 an hour since you're getting cussed out by customers. And McDonald's could afford it.
Okay, now what does that mean? Worth it? Means you wouldn't do it for $20 an hour?
I've never worked. I worked retail for 4 hours. I'm not a retail type.
I mean, is this a decision you yourself are projecting, or are you thinking about other people?
Well, my mother worked in a hotel, so I'm very familiar and I understand what I think. I would put assign some value to work. But if you ask me, would I do it? Right? I won't do it. I don't care what they pay me. So if they pay.
No, I get it. I mean, there are some jobs I wouldn't do for $100 an hour, and there are other jobs I would probably do for $1 an hour.
Yeah.
Well,
so I would work. There are jobs that I do for free, so I don't have. You know what I mean? So there's some things that I'll do for free.
I'll tell you.
Do you still want my answer, or has that ship sailed?
No, we want your answer, but you're not ready to give it yet. So Nanika, make her point, and then you can tell us your answer.
Okay. Ahead, so what I'm saying is that speaking of someone who used to work at Dunkin' Donuts and only made $3 an hour at the time. $3.
It wasn't $3. It was never. It was not $3. It was probably $3.35.
No.
$3.35.
No.
Maybe she's older than we think she is.
No, she's not older than me, and so it's not $3. So
maybe she worked at the Manhattan Dunkin' Donuts, and it paid a lot of money.
I'm telling you, they paid me $3.10 an hour. I'm telling you.
Well, you said $3.10. Okay, I remember $3.10. I don't remember $3. Okay.
Oh no, I was getting paid $3.10 an hour.
Okay, all right, that I remember. I remember
$20. I would do the $20 an hour at McDonald's. I would, and I'm saying that, Mike, as speaking for other people or speaking for, and I was a teenage mom, that $3.10 didn't go anywhere. If I was making maybe $9 an hour, I would probably get a little bit somewhere, but not where I really wanted to be. So with that being said, give us your answer.
Okay. If some woman decides to open a Dunkin' Donuts on your street, and she finds some other young man who wants to work for her, and they come to an agreement. He's going to work for her a certain number of hours and do a certain task, and then she's agreed to pay him $13 an hour. I'm just making up an example. And you think, Narnique, for example, you're in charge of the world, or the three of us are in charge of the world, and we took a vote, and we decided that the minimum wage is going to be $15 an hour. What are you going to tell those two people is the reason why you're smarter than they are? That's a real question. I'm not asking you to skirt it. I'm asking you, really, give me an answer. What are you going to tell them?
We asked you a question that you still haven't answered yet. So answer that question first before you keep asking us questions.
As an economist,
okay,
there is no such thing as a real economist who will give you any other answer, but it should be absolutely illegal to interrupt a transaction between two grown-ass adults.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, I might not like it, some guy offers my daughter $9 an hour, I may go down there and say, what the hell are you doing? She deserves 11. Or if somebody offers me 40 and I think I'm worth 50, I might get pissed. I'm not saying I have to like it. I'm just saying it's not up to me, and someone needs to go to Congress and remind our Congress people that they're just as dumb as they were before they were elected, and it shouldn't be up to them.
So I want to try to understand what your answer is, right? You said they're not, so there should be no minimum age whatsoever. So everybody should go to the place they want to work for, or employers, when they say, oh, we're hiring someone, everyone should negotiate their own salary. So if one person can get them to pay them $35 an hour and another person was not smart enough to ask for that much and they only got,
well, that's typically now how it works, right?
I'm just asking, and so because I don't understand what it is that you're saying about how it is you decide like what a person's going to get paid.
I'm saying the government neither has the intelligence nor the authority to tell people what transactions ought to be illegal.
All right. And so what system, so the system that should be in place to dictate how a person get paid should just be what they can negotiate?
Which is what it is now.
No, there's a minimum wage. Like in Florida, like there's a minimum wage. So if you want a company can have to pay you at least that amount. So there's a starting point, and if you can negotiate higher than that, then fine. But there's a bottom.
Right now, below the minimum wage.
That's not zero, so that you're starting at a number. And some companies were like, that's all they say I got to pay you, and that's all I'm going to pay you.
That's right. And anything below the minimum wage right now is illegal. It's against the law.
My question is, so are you saying that should not be the case, that there should be
no minimum wage? Absolutely should not be the case.
That should be no minimum wage.
There should not be a minimum wage.
Okay.
That's as an ethical and efficiency matter. Now I'll tell you the practical reason. Because it kills jobs. And there are people who will lie to you for political reasons and tell you that's not true, but they're lying to you for political reasons.
Okay. All right then. So
why do we have 11 million jobs with 8 million people unemployed?
For a variety of reasons. And right now, the unemployment rate is not that bad by historic standards. I wish it were zero, right? We used to believe, when I was in school, when your parents were not yet born, when I was in school, we used to believe.
My parents were born. I was born while you were in school too, but okay.
All right. Well, when I was an undergrad starting out, right, we used to believe, I was an undergrad starting in 78. We used to believe that the minimum unemployment rate was about 5.5%. There was just 5%. There was just no way in a long-term basis you could get it below that. And as it turns out, we were wrong, right? We've had some years in the last 10 where despite some bad policy and because of some good policy in some cases, we were able to get an unemployment rate that was even lower than that. Remember just a few years ago, we were down to like before COVID, we were down to like a 3.5% unemployment rate. Now it's back up a little bit. It's not little if you're one of the people unemployed. It's horrible. Unemployment is a true scourge on our culture. But by historical standards, we're not doing too badly. We need to get back to work. We need to get this pandemic behind us. There are a number of reasons why it's taking longer. I think that the true history of the pandemic will not accurately be written until 10 years from now, when we can look back and really know what the data say. So I would refrain from saying anything too profound about COVID and sounding like an idiot 10 years from now, because we're going to be a lot smarter later on than we are now. But once we get this behind us, I think our unemployment rate is going to go back into the 3% range. And we're going to feel a lot better about that. But just structurally speaking, you can't get it. You can't get it below 3.5. It's just virtually impossible. There's too much churn in the economy, and you want there to be some churn in the economy. You don't want a Japanese system where, until recently anyway, in Japan, it was lifelong employment. And one of the problems with that is that it was just a sclerotic environment in which to do business. It's one of the reasons why Japan fell so quickly behind the United States in economic development.
Yet everyone's employed. Everybody got a job.
They did have a high employment, low unemployment rate, but it all went up in smoke, and that's too bad.
Okay. All right. So tell folks why to vote for you. Tell them how to get in touch with you. Tell them how to.
Well, thank you.
Money.
You can go to the website. It's Mike Ter Maat 2022.com. You got to spell it right though. MIKE.
You still have 2-1 running.
Yeah, you can go to 2021. It'll send you to the right place. MIKETERMAAT 2022.com. You'll see my real phone number there. It's not a fake phone number. It's the cell phone I carry in my pocket. So if any of your viewers want to text me or call, if you call, I probably won't know who it is, so I might not answer. But if you want to text me and you say, I really like what you said, or man, you sound like an idiot when you talk about this or that, we can have a chat. I don't mind. I pass out a lot of paraphernalia in the Walmart parking lots and enjoy those conversations. Not everyone agrees with you, of course, but a big part of the reason I'm in the race is to let people know that free markets work. They can make our lives better. That if we put a focus on liberty and individual rights, we can improve our economic situations and let people live their lives as they see fit. And I do believe that bad public policy is the big reason why we're having a darn hard time beating intergenerational poverty.
All
right. So we're putting up your information now. We have Mike Ter Maat at 2022.com. His number is 202-281-6363. He said it right here that you can text him and tell him anything you want, and he will chat with you. It's important that people talk to these candidates, get to know them, understand their platform, understand their ideology, and make an informed decision. Mike Ter Maat will be on the ballot January 11th.
January 11th. The only thing I won't put up with is someone making fun or saying mean things about you two, because you two care about the people in District 20, and I really respect that. And you having me on your program, I'm just grateful for that, and grateful for your good attitudes and open minds.
Absolutely.
Thank you too. And it was a good conversation. You know, I definitely appreciate
a lot of fun. We should do it again.
Yeah, different perspective.
I really like different perspective. Yep. I think after the primary, we'll get you back on and have.
That'd be a lot of fun. I'd like that.
Things probably might change by then, but it was a great conversation. I learned a lot. I really appreciate it, and I love the fact that we were able to have a conversation and maybe not agree on everything.
Thank you so much.
And they're great ideas, and I think you definitely made that point about. It depends on. It really matters who you give these positions of power to.
Absolutely,
it absolutely matters.
Fortunately or unfortunately, it does, doesn't it?
It matters.
It does. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. We'll talk later.
Yes.
Soon, and good luck if we don't get a chance to speak to you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye. All right. Yeah, I thought that was a good conversation. You know, what are your thoughts?
Oh wow. You know, like no minimum wage, no public school, none should be free. It's all about business. I mean, I guess we don't want the government telling us what to do. I don't know. I'm not in that headspace yet. I can't, you know, and I don't know if I've been brainwashed or like I'm drinking the two-party system Kool-Aid. I don't know what it is, but I'm not in that place where I think there shouldn't be a national minimum wage, that the federal government shouldn't make certain decisions about particular issues, right? You know, and let me just I'm gonna give an example, because when he was talking, I'm just like, that whole just letting people do what they want to do, how they want to do it, it's really difficult. So I teach at one of the colleges, and one of the things I decided to do one semester, right? It lasted like a week, is that I had all of the assignments there, and I had no due dates on any of them, right? I didn't put it, I was like, no, just get it done by the end of the term. It was panic in that room. They're like, no, and so I ended up having to go in and put due dates for all of the assignments. I'm like, no, just you got till December 9th, get it done.
Right.
It was just like, I don't know if they ain't ready. I don't know what it was, but it was a whole problem, right? And so I had to go and get the due dates. I have another situation. Another thing that I'm trying is that like I didn't want to make my syllabus available because we have contents because everything's online. The contents open up every week. There's a due date for when the next. So I'm like, well, it don't matter what the syllabus say. All of your assignments are here. They're like, no, but we need a syllabus. Like if I don't have a syllabus, then how do I know what to do? You know what to do because the module opens up every week, but it's a problem, right? So I understand what he's saying, but it's not gonna work. And I don't like to be one of them people that say, oh, you got to do baby steps, you got to give people time and all that, because then I don't want nobody white telling me like my time ain't due yet for me to get what it is that I want, right? But some of the things he's saying is
it just to me, and I totally agree with you. I totally agree.
Not enough structure.
Yeah, not only there's not enough structure. The other thing I disagree with is just the notion of checks and balances seem to be not an issue where he is concerned. Where the federal government do their thing and we do our thing or whatever, but there is checks and balances. There has to be.
We're the United States of America.
Right.
We're not 50 separate states. I mean, we are 50 separate, but we're still the United States of America. So some things we need to be united on.
And not only that, the Senate, the Senate, even though we have 100 senators for all our states, but we still I have to watch what the Georgia senator is doing. I have to watch what the Nevada senator. I have to keep an eye on all of them because we are the United States. Because what they do affects us all. So the mere notion of not kind of being separate but equal type thing or whatever.
I don't know if he even got into the equal. He just said separate.
Yeah,
and then even with the state, he was like, no, the state still shouldn't tell the county or the city what to do.
Yeah, so
we're gonna do one thing in Hallandale, another thing in Fort Lauderdale, something else in Dania Beach, another thing in Davies, something else in Miramar. How many cities in Broward? Like 31 or something like that. So all 31 cities about to operate in a whole different space.
Or all 67 counties are going to do different things in Florida. Like there has to be.
He's not even doing it by the county. He said by the city. So like I drive out of Miramar, across 441 into Hollywood, and it's a whole other set of rules that I got to play by.
But you're running for a congressional seat that affects all 67 counties at some point. There'll be some decisions that you all have to make together. There's some, you know what I'm saying? Like there's these. You all have to get on one accord. There needs to be some consistency. There needs to be collaboration, and there needs to be a hierarchy. I believe
he wants to go there to basically tell them big government stay out of people's life.
I don't like you. I don't think I'm there yet in my mindset.
I'm not. I know I ain't there yet. I mean, it was a great conversation. I understand. I can appreciate what he's saying. Yeah. But I'm on the practical side of things. I think it's hard. It's hard. It's gonna be a hard sell. I mean, these kids were like, I need a due date. I'm like, what? Just get it done in the next 16 weeks. So if they looking for due dates, they're not gonna be like, let everybody, run things. They're like, no, I need some rules.
And it just seems like there's this kind of disconnect with the Constitution also. Like, governors, senators, they all look to the Constitution to make decisions or back their decision making, right? So at some point you're like, well, I'm not going to even look at that no more because they need to mind their business. I need to do what I'm doing here. I'm autonomous over here. The conversation about the school and public
schools that they need to have competition. That we need more private schools.
So I didn't even get into what I really wanted to tell him about. Like, okay, so you're basically saying, okay, you got your vaccination, you wear your mask if you have to, but you don't want to tell other people. So forget that.
He's ready to get a booster.
I'm ready to get a booster too when my booster time come around. But what I'm saying is, in the meantime, in between time, don't we have to do things to mitigate this pandemic and make sure that it doesn't? It's just, to me, like, if that's the libertarian thought process and that's how they roll with, like, federal government, not too much. They don't want too much government in their business or whatever. We don't live in a
vacuum.
No,
and it doesn't take into consideration like biases, right? It doesn't take that into consideration, because it's like, okay, you're gonna have somebody making rules. What if that person who's making rules don't like women, don't like people of color, don't like members of the LGBTQAI community? Like, it don't take all of that into consideration. So you kind of, and then that also assumes that people gonna always act right. You know what I'm saying? And they're gonna do the right thing, whatever the right thing may be. And I start off like my classes, and we talk about like, why do we need criminal law? Do we need? Don't people know how to behave? Won't they behave properly? And them kids be like, no, we need people to know that there's going to be some sort of consequence, or people need some kind of guidelines, or they need to know like, this is acceptable behavior, this is unacceptable behavior. So to just be like, let folks just kind of do it how they want to do it, I don't know, man. I don't know.
There's a lot of,
and I'm probably brainwashed. I probably drank all that Kool-Aid. I probably did.
I may be right up there with you. It's just the notion of not having a foundation in terms of how things go. The chain of command. You know
Especially
what I mean?
The minimum wage, man. I mean, they would have people working for $2.
Yeah, and then the thing with minimum in his response to the minimum wage, when he says, well, why not 50?
He didn't want to answer that question. He did not want to answer that because he kept asking us questions. I'm like, no, bro, you answer the question. And he still ain't answer it. So, but he basically said there don't need to be no minimum wage.
Then you told him, don't pay attention to Narnique.
Yeah, don't pay attention to Narnique. Talking about $100 to work at McDonald's. Get out of here, girl.
Listen, let me tell you something. I did that because I wanted him to answer the question, which he didn't. But
he finally answered it and said that there should be no federal minimum wage.
But to even say that there shouldn't be a regulation for that. You get what I'm saying? Like,
or like no. I didn't talk about the federal minimum wage. I talked about the state. There should be no state minimum wage.
Right. To even say that, it's to the point where it's like it was more so I got to protect businesses. I don't, the person who's trying to work, that's not my concern. My concern is we got to protect businesses. That's how I felt. That's how I took it. It was just, and then it was just, I don't know if that is the libertarian ideology. I've been in that two-party system for too long, and I can't see past the two-party system and how they think and how they roll. So
I just don't. I think two-party system is one, and then I just don't see how. And I do believe in state rights, but I do also believe that there's certain things that the federal government need to like not leave it up to the state, because it can't be so different everywhere. Like, it can't be like when I leave Florida and go into Georgia, I'm like, oh, well, I can't. There's certain things that we need to be like, you know what? We all on the same page when it comes to this particular thing, right? There's certain things that I think the states kind of need to be on the same page, and like let him tell it. I think like once you drive into the next city, you got to try to figure out what them rules are, and that might be a little too much.
Police reform thing took me out. I was like,
they should be negotiating with the police, with the PBA.
Yeah, the negotiating thing, but it seemed like he was putting all the not the problems, but all the responsibility back on elected officials.
But I don't know if it was. I think he was saying like they need to do more. They should ask for more. But
I mean, I've been in places where they've had these kind of conversations and hear back, or been in a meeting or a commissioner's meeting or whatever, where you have them ask for more. And the union was like, hell no, we won't go. Like, what do? You know what I'm saying? I can't remember her name, but she was the youngest mayor. I think it was in Hallandale.
Tamara?
No.
Oh, Sabrina. Oh, yeah, she's in Hallandale. Yeah,
okay,
Sabrina. Talavera, something like that.
Yeah. She was like, she was basically giving the police department the business to the point where they came out against her, basically threatening to quit. And my thing is, and I wanted to use that, and I couldn't remember her name at the time to bring that up to him.
Yeah, but I think we kind of mentioned that, like, they'll just not come to work and have everybody all scared because they come to,
Yeah, and it's like, to me, and then, and then when he said, well, more white people get killed by police than black people. Okay, well, you are.
But that's because it's just more white people, just like there's more poor white people than there are poor black people.
Right. So
one
it's
too.
just and I was gonna say that. I said, well,
that's just a numbers thing.
Well, when I said okay, I meant like, okay, well, y'all just a majority. So that's like
it's more y'all. So yes, more y'all.
Of course,
it's like more y'all are poor.
But the point I'm trying to make is, but the point I'm trying to make is, if it wasn't for Black and brown people making an issue about us being, murdered the way that we get murdered with police.
And the reason why we end up murdered, right? And there might be a number, like if you do a deeper dive into like, okay, yes, there's more white folks that are getting killed by cops. I would want to know, like, yo, tell me how that standoff was. Like, what did that look like before the police officer decided to take this person's life? Like, what was happening when it got to the point where the police? I would want to see that. Give me a deep dive into how that white person ended up dead, and then look at how it is that Black person ended up dead, right? Yeah. And I think that would be very different. It
would be very different. It's the same. That's the same notion as one saying when a Black person is killed by police, well, did they comply? That's like the same question in the sense that, they want to.
All they was trying to do was cross the street with their bike. Y'all started bothering them for jaywalking. They shouldn't have ended up dead over that. You should have just got out your feelings and leave them alone.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. So that was definitely an interesting conversation. So
I thought it was a great conversation. And I think that it was good for us to see the other side. I don't think that I would, be surprised if he doesn't go anywhere, because I think that
he's gonna be on the ballot. No.
He's gonna be on the ballot, but he's not gonna. I don't think that that he may win. He may siphon some votes away from
who? A Republican or a Democrat?
I think he would take away from the Democrats, not the Republicans. Okay. I think that our numbers have risen in NPA registrations, right? And so, and knowing with what we've been through the last 4 years, you have a lot of people who are conflicted and uncomfortable. And many of those NPAs were Republicans. Like, they did some research.
Okay.
I'm gonna pull that out. There was some research done that many of them had switched their party, not even their parties. They switched from being a Republican to an NPA. They just wanted to be neutral for, I don't know for how long. But so I don't know that it could work out for the Democrats, or it could work out for the Republicans. Either way, he's going to siphon some.
The fact that he said he's a former Republican and maybe they were watching, maybe the Republicans will vote for him, and he may take votes away from the Republicans.
I don't know. I'm glad you asked him that question. I was gonna ask him after we get some information, but you was right on top of it. You were like, right off the get-go, I got to find out.
I need to know.
You were like, look, excuse me.
Let's get that started first. And then how you go from an economist to being a cop? Tell me that. I need to understand these transitions. I need to understand so we can. I need to know. Yeah, I need to know how that transition happened so I know how this conversation gonna go. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, so we had reached out to the write-in candidate.
Don't make any announcements. Just saying that she's just not available right now.
Yes, we had reached out to the write-in candidate who's unavailable. We have the only person we didn't have an opportunity to speak to is either we did not reach out to the Republican candidate.
You didn't reach out to the Republicans? Okay, we can reach out to the Republicans.
I think we should though. I think we should have the Libertarian on. We should have the Republicans.
Yeah, and that was a great conversation. I'm telling you, like I'm here for it. I had a really good conversation. Thank you, Mr. Mike Ter Maat, for talking to us.
Yes, we did. Yeah, that was good. We had a great conversation.
No, that was a good conversation. Yeah, we agreed to disagree. But it was a good conversation.
But we didn't even argue. We were just like, cool. It was.
He said he was kind of getting a little testy. He said, "I'll wait. I ain't gonna interrupt you." Because I interrupted him a few times, and he was like, "Okay."
His defense, co-host, you did interrupt.
I did, cause hey.
But you didn't even give him a call. You were just on him.
No, cause some of that stuff, I ain't wanted to slide by. I didn't know how to slow him down. I was like, no, bruh. Because there was a couple other things I was gonna ask, but we kind of went past it, and I was like, it's gonna be weird to kind of come back.
Yeah,
So that's why there was some of the stuff I was like, no, I'm gonna have to cut this man off because he's gonna start. You know, I'm gonna cut you off because I need to hear it. But yeah, no, it was very, very good. I think we should reach out to. Yes, I will. Diana Cruz, we're gonna reach out to the Republicans. We'll be curious.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. We're gonna definitely do that. We're gonna definitely do that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we cool over here. We don't give nobody no hard time.
So is it 3 Republicans in the race? Is it 3 of them?
I thought that there was 3. I believe that there was 3.
Oh, no, so it's 11 Democrats, 1 Libertarian, 1 write-in, so that's 13. So it's 4. So there's 4 Republicans because it's 17 people. It's 17 people total in the race.
No. There was another. Did you include that Siddiqui guy in the?
Yeah, because it's 11 Republicans with Imran, right?
Okay.
So it's 11 of them. There's a Libertarian, the write-in.
Oh, there's an NPA. No. There's 3 Republicans and an NPA.
1 NPA. Oh, so there's an NPA too. Okay.
There's an NPA also. There's an NPA also. So we'll reach out to those 3. Those 4. 3 Republicans and an NPA. Yeah, there's an NPA. So there's an NPA. So we'll reach out. Absolutely. I think we should. I'm going to send out some messages today, see if we can get them to come on. But I thought it was a great conversation. I mean, it
was. I'm glad we did that. Thank you, Mr. Neptune.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Neptune, shout out.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Neptune. Thank you, Ms. Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Neptune. Yeah, so I thought that was a great conversation. I think we need to continue it. I think it's important that we see other views, even though we don't agree.
We don't know yet. We realize we don't agree until it's over. So, but it's good to hear.
I didn't agree the whole time he was talking.
I agree with some of the things he said though. I agree with some of it. It was just some of it. I was like,
Let me think. I think there was like 2 or 3 things, two things that I agreed with him on. That I thought that he was dead on. Yeah, I did. He does have some ideas, and
but for me, I was sitting there like I could tell he was an academic, and I could tell he was an economist because like some of the things he was talking about, I'm like, oh, that's so academic of you. It's just not practical, right? And like a lot of it was I could tell from the conversation. I was like, yeah, that's the theoretical way that this should happen, but the reality of it all is a little bit different. So I could tell he
had a good sense of issues. He had a good sense of issues.
Yeah, definitely.
He understood some things, and I think that some of his things can work if applied. But overall, I mean, he's a libertarian.
Oh, there was one other thing I wanted to say. When he was talking about how a lot of people agreed on the when they had the crime bill. That they were like, it was crazy out here because that was some of that was because of the crack, right? The crack on these streets was just like people ain't know what to do. I'm like, well, jail was the answer, but okay, because that's what the crime bill did. Just like,
but then if you notice, he said, I thought that was okay, but then when he went to this opioid thing, all of a sudden,
so you can look at that a couple different ways, right? Yeah. You could be like, well, the opioid was like, well, they kind of learned from like how they dealt with the crack that it didn't work to put everybody in jail. So like now, we should provide medical, like rehab instead of prison. So it could be that they learned from the error of their ways, or they could be that, and he was trying to suggest that it was like a lot of poor folks and people of color that at least I thought that he was trying to suggest there was a lot of poor folks and people of color who were heroin addicts or opioid addicts. That ain't accurate. Then he fixed it and said, well, people of means have more ways of treatment for those things. Which I'll say he cleaned it up because I was sitting there like, and I was about to get on him, and then he was like, "Oh, at least the folks with money, they have ways to kind of provide treatment." I was like, "All right, I'm gonna give you that one."
Well, I feel like he does have a good sense of the issues. I think he has a good sense of the issues. Now, will some of his solutions come to? I honestly didn't get like clear solutions. I got like some things that I didn't get because I was like, you saw me. I was like, okay, well, what's your plan then? What you gonna do?
Answer that question. What you gonna do about it? And then we finally got him to say like no minimum wage.
That was the no minimum wage question, but I had the other question, and I was like, so what's your plan? What's the plan?
Yeah. No, when you were talking about that minimum wage, that $3, I'm like, girl, you ain't work for no $3 because I ain't never worked for $3, and I'm older than you. So okay, so I remember $3.10. I remember $3.10, and then it went to $3.35. But I was in high school when it was $3.35, so I don't understand how you worked for that.
I was working on Dunkin' Donuts on where was it? It was.
And what year was that?
Lauderhill. It was in Lauderhill, huh?
And what year? What year? Because minimum wage was $3.35, like in 1988 when I was in high school. So I don't understand when I can't. Yes, that's why I can't understand how you work for $3.10. Because when I was in high school, minimum wage was, and I was, and I graduated before you.
I want to say it was in 92.
You were working for $3.10?
Yep, in 92. I was. God honest truth. $3.10. $3. And I remembered it very clearly.
In 92?
In 92. In 92. Mm-hmm. $3.10 in Lauderhill. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was in Chicago then. It was like $5.85 then.
And there was no they have since torn down that Dunkin' Donuts is no longer there. It's some kind of gas station now or whatever. Uh-huh. But yes, it was $3.92. I clearly remember because I was renting out a room, and that rent and the room rent was $180 a month, right? And I was trying to make, like, I would make most of the money to pay the rent from tips.
Mm-hmm.
And back in the day,
now that makes sense. Okay. Well, was tips part of your pay? Yes. Okay, now that makes sense. Now that makes sense. So if tips was part of what you would, if your salary included tips, then you made $3.10. But if you were, because I'm just like, hell nah. Okay, but if you were getting a job that had a minimum wage, okay, now that makes sense. All right. Tips was part. I was just like, But now that makes sense. If part of your job was tips, then your minimum wage was less because now that makes sense.
The tips had to make up the rest. Yeah, the tips had to make up the rest.
Okay, and they could pay you less if you were like in like in the restaurant business and that kind of stuff because tips were included in your salary, so your minimum wage was less than a regular person. Okay, that makes sense because I'm just like $3.10, girl, please. Okay, and all right.
You have me looking like a whole liar.
No, it's not about a whole lie. It just didn't make, because that one thing, like, I mean, if it's something I don't know, then I'm not going to, but I was like, how could that be when I was in high school, the minimum wage was $3.35 and I'm older than you. So how could you work for $3.10? And I never did, So, yeah. But okay, so if your job included tips, then that makes sense. All right.
They were leaving me quarters.
I had a friend that she was mad at you. She'd leave you a penny. I was like, girl, I'm not sitting here, me, I don't play that when it comes to tipping. So, I was just like,
Listen, that was back in 92, and it was a lot of, around the time when I was working there, the snowbirds were coming in from Canada and all that other stuff. So the older generation, they were like, here you go, they thought a quarter went a long way. They left 50 cents, they left, thing or whatever. So it's like, so it was $3.10 plus tips. That's what it was.
Okay. All right. Now my brain. All right.
I'm sorry. I didn't know that
I was wrecking my brain. I was literally Googling what minimum wage was in Florida in 1992. Cause I'm like, no, I'm good. I was. Cause I'm like, $3.10.
It was $3.10.
Because I started working at 14 and I was making $3.35.
$3.10 plus tips.
All right, plus tips.
We're done.
I'm still on the show. So talking to me. All right, people, we kept you guys for 2 hours. Thank you for hanging in with us. Because there's a couple folks that are still watching. Thank you so much. And if we don't have a candidate to speak to next Wednesday, we're gonna go back to our regular show. Talking about disability, talking about the caucasity, we do
some caucasity.
Yeah,
we do some caucasity. We thank you so much. If you like our show, subscribe, and share on YouTube,
Facebook, and YouTube.
Facebook, share our page. And if you would like to be part of our show, you want to come on our show and talk about some things, we do
slide into our DMs.
Slide into our racist page, Sonny. Slide
into the DMs.
We welcome people to come on our show. We talk about race and race, but we also talk about everything in between. So we always make a segment, and we can add a segment to talk about anything that is bothering you, making you feel on some type of way. We could discuss it. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So slide into our DMs. and let us know what you would like to see on the show moving forward. We thank you again for coming. Make sure you continue to wear your mask and social distance whenever possible.
Mhm.
And I'm all about the school district mandating masks.
Yeah, so thank you, Mike Ter Maat and Mr. Neptune for reaching out to us to have him on the show.
Was an awesome show.
Alrighty.
All
Good
right.
evening,
Y'all
everyone.
later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.